We put together some learning outcomes, but today we're going to look at being able to describe universal technology versus assistive technology. You're going to be able to define AT consideration and assessment, and then know kind of the key pieces of AT implementation planning, and then know where to go for resources and support in all of these things, whether you are building district capacity or you're individually supporting students with AT. We've got this term floating around, universal technology. And I had a teacher the other day say to me, well, now that technology is everywhere, kids have one-on-one devices, there's not such a need to consider AT or put it in their IEP. So I thought, oh, we need to talk about what is it universal technology? It's technology that's available to all students at any time, and is used based on that student's need or preference because it's just available. You might also hear the term technology enhanced classroom. That's been around a long time, and that's where you're using technology for instruction and also just having a technology rich environment that's more inclusive. And so that technology that's available for everyone does differ from assistive technology. We want to encourage that universal technology availability, because when we have instructional strategies paired with that technology, then it really sets the stage for inclusive learning environments. And then it keeps us from just providing accessibility on the basis of necessity, and more kids have access to the tools. But when it comes to assistive technology, we really do have a legal definition. Let's just talk about what that legal definition is in IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act. Assistive technology is any item, piece of equipment, software, program, or product system that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of persons with disabilities. So it really can be technology that helps with students have difficulty speaking, typing, writing, remembering, pointing, seeing, hearing, learning, walking, and many other things. ATIA, Assistive Technology Industry Association, gives some nice examples of assistive technology. So I put a link there so you can just see all the different kinds of things that are considered assistive technology. We've got things like, low-tech communication boards, hardware, we've got software. So a lot of different things here that could be considered assistive technology. So I wanted just us to think a little bit about examples of when universal technology for one student is considered assistive technology for another. Speech to text, text to speech. So these are things built into our operating systems, some things built into our web browsers, and they're universally available. But then there's students who have specific barriers to accessing text that would need that text to speech as a assistive technology. So immersive reader, read aloud, visual supports. Assistive technology consideration is a process in the IEP. Many of you know this because you are writing IEPs and participating in them. So the team is considering AT under that special factors area with a key question. And often that key question isn't sitting there in the IEP for you to consider. It just says special factors, is AT needed? But we're really thinking about, does the student need technology to access their curriculum or to make progress on goals? Right? IEP goals and even standards, learning standards. And then in the 504 process, we're also considering what accommodations and modifications are needed. And that could be assistive technology. So this is something that must be considered within an IEP. We have a little flow chart. You may have seen others out there, assistive technology consideration flow charts. And this can help your teams if they're unclear about what AT consideration would look like.
So there's a key question that the IEP team wants to look at when considering that. And there's really two key questions. First, is the student making progress on their annual goals? And does the student have equitable access to general education curricula? So it's an and. So you want to know the answer to both of those. And if the answer is yes, they are making progress and they do have access to the equitable access to the general education curricula, the answer is yes, then you need to ask, is the student currently using AT to make progress on goals or to access curricula? And again, if the answer is yes, the student is currently using AT and AT is needed, you document that in the IEP under AT devices are needed, and you include, this is important, the AT services and training if needed. So you document that the AT is needed and also the services and the training.
Where that is documented in the IEP is under that special factors, but also it could be other places in the IEP, like, you know, in present levels, on the accommodations page, within some of the goals.
And then also, if they are making progress and they have equitable access, but they do not use AT, then you can say, no, the student is not currently using AT and it is not needed. But you also need to document that in the IEP and put the rationale that for the reason they don't need it. So you want to let them know that you have considered it and they don't need it because they are making their adequate progress without the AT.
What you don't want to put there is NA, not applicable. You want to put something that indicates that consideration.
So a question, would the access to general education curricula be meant to include consideration of access to general education settings? Or is that another relevant consideration for teams in thinking about AT? That is a really good question.
Yes, access to the learning environment would be part of that question.
Right. So when you're asking those two key questions, if the answer is no, they're either not making progress or they do not have equitable access to the general education curriculum, then you need to consider, does the team that's gathered have the necessary data to determine the need for AT? If you do, as a team, have that, then you consider the data and determine if AT is needed. And then you're going to document that decision in the IEP. And again, include a rationale and the AT devices, services, and training that might be needed.
And an example of that is a teacher leading up to the IEP might have tried text-to-speech, and she might have tried, you know, a natural voice versus an electronic voice, and tried a few things and said, wow, look at the student's comprehension when I'm using this text-to-speech. Coming to the IEP with that data that shows how that impacts the student can be the data you're using to make those decisions.
Now, if the team decides that, no, we don't have the necessary data, that's when you're going to move forward with an AT assessment, and that's needed to gather that additional data. And so at that point, you can document the team's decision in the IEP, and then you can move forward with an assessment. Just realize you may be required at that point to initiate a prior written notice before you initiate that. When you are considering AT, there is a process called the SETT process that has been around for actually quite a few years. Joy Zabala created it, and most people that I know that do AT assessments use some form of the SETT process. So this is a great place to start with consideration. And we just have a short video to show you the sound.
For some children, learning new skills can be challenging, and the typical classroom accommodations may not be enough. If a child is having difficulties reading, writing, communicating, or simply participating in classroom activities, assistive technology may be the key in supporting the child's learning and development. But how can peer coaches help teachers consider the right AT tools and strategies to introduce? Since there are different variables to consider for any AT tool to be successful, it's important to be consistent and follow the same framework with every child. The SETT framework, created by Joy Zabala in 1996, is a 4-part model that encourages teachers to examine these variables in a systematic way, understanding and gathering data about the following. The student. What are the child's needs or weaknesses and his or her abilities or strengths? If the child has an individual education plan or IEP already, what is the present level of performance towards measurable goals?
She has an IEP for communication.
The environments. What are the child's educational routines? What are the instructional and physical arrangements at school that could prevent the child from being successful at a given task? The tasks. What is it that the child needs to accomplish? Or what are some of the child's IEP goals and objectives? What are the expectations for the child during those activities and within their classroom environment? AT tools. What accommodations, strategies, and solutions should be considered? What AT tool options would best match the child's needs? How might these tools be used?
How about Lorenzo to use some words? Perfect.
When considering AT, it is in the best interest of the child to include everyone involved in the child's education, from the appropriate educational and related service professionals to the caregivers.
This equipment right here, we're going to be using this with
In this way, we can have a complete picture of the child's strengths and challenges in their daily lives and across different environments.
You have to pull.
Now that you understand the framework, let's see how we can use it.
Okay. So we thought that was a great description of how to use SETT. So here is just an example of a modified version of the SETT process form so that you could use. So you have the student, the environment, the task, and then the tools and features. And you can just, we actually give you an example of this form that's you could use if you want to download it.
So if anybody wants to dive deeper in the SETT process in thinking about one of your students or just thinking about how to use it, later in the presentation, we have a Tech Assist link. We'd love to support you, especially if you're new to this, to thinking through this SETT process.
Somebody said they have started using it, but they're still trying to get it rolled out district-wide. Those kind of changes take time. So the more you use it, the more people are going to know about it, and it will hopefully spread out into your district-wide. We like to divide it up for reading and writing and math because sometimes they have strengths in one subject and then in other subjects, like math, for instance, they could have a strength in being able to do math, but their weakness could be in not being able to write it very well. And so it's actually that would affect how they could do the process of math. And so you just go down and you write each one of those. And then you also write the environment. And as someone had said, sometimes just access and environment can be part of the problem. I worked with a student who was paralyzed from the neck down. So had to have access in a wheelchair, and in science, loved science, but the tables were too high. So we needed to get just that physical access for that student. And then as you're looking at the environment and the student, you also want to look at the specific task that you're trying to do. Sometimes one task, there's just a specific task, as I said, in maybe the writing of the math is the task, but there's other pieces that aren't a problem. So you look at the specific task and then you look at the tool that matches what would help that student with that task. So that's how you look at this process. When you are thinking about AT consideration versus AT assessment, the consideration is it can occur before, but it also occurs within the IEP meeting. So that's when the team actually discusses it and considers it. Like Kristen said, you may have been considering it ahead of time, but you were probably actually doing a little bit of assessment when you were doing that. This can occur within the IEP, but an assessment actually is compiled over days, weeks, or months, and it occurs outside of that IEP meeting. So you're actually trying different things, assessing what might work and might not work. That's one difference. And an AT consideration is completed with your existing data from levels of performance, whereas the assessment involves gathering new data over multiple interactions, and it's with the student and the team members, and it includes the trials. And then the process, the AT process has those two key questions. Does the student require AT to make progress on annual goals and have equitable access to the general education curriculum? So that's those key questions. Whereas the AT process, the AT assessment is a process where you're gathering data, you're determining what AT to trial, you're trialing the AT and gathering the data from those trials, and then you're deciding if the AT is required. So that's a process. And then when you do AT consideration in the IEP, it's one of the special considerations that IEP teams must address in developing or reviewing the IEP. Whereas the definition of an AT assessment is the evaluation of the needs of a child with a disability, including a functional evaluation of the child in the child's customary environment. That's what's going to help with the selection of your AT. So that could mean that you need to look in multiple environments for that AT. And it even could be that you're looking at recess, not just in a classroom setting. So it's that, where do they need the AT in their customary environments?
The functional assessment in their current environment, all of that points to that IEP team coming together to do that assessment.
You can have a third party group come in, but they are not going to know your student like the team knows the student. Part of this functional assessment is it's the customary environment. And so the IEP team is the one who knows that student and their environment and what the tasks are and the needs are. And so that's why it really needs to be done with the student's team, IEP team. And when you can have even the special ed tech center, we are happy to do a consultation with you, but we do not do the assessment. We actually support you and give you some tools and help. But really the IEP team is the one who knows that student and their functional capabilities in their environment the best. So it needs to be that IEP team who's doing that assessment. It says when doing the functional assessment for something like an AAC device, could the evaluation in a child's customary environment include looking at how they use the device to get support from caregivers with homework at home or in an after-school program? And the answer to that is yes. We do have some resources for you on both consideration and assessment. And so we're going to actually just show those to you. We're going to do it kind of quickly. It's an organization called QUIET. It stands for Quality Indicators in Assistive Technology. And they have given some great forms and guides to be able to do this. One of theirs is called the Consideration Guide. As we pull that up here, I'm just going to show it to you. And you have a link to all of these in the slide deck. So as you can see, it gives you some biographical information, but then it really does fall kind of along the SETT continuum. You have your student, and so you have your instructional area. And so, what area would the student be struggling with? And then you move over to what are the tasks that need to be completed. And so they ask you things like, since the last IEP, what accommodations and modifications have you tried? And you can list them and you can say whether the student is making adequate progress, or you can list other accommodations to explore. Or you can say no accommodations have been tried. So here's where you're considering it. And you're considering, are they meeting their progress and their goals? Or are they not? And they need to look at some AT. And then you move over, and since the last IEP, what assistive technology has been tried? And circle the AT that's currently being used. And then right here, student is not making adequate progress with the current AT. So then list other AT to explore, or no, we haven't even tried any. And then you move over to the last category where you consider the outcomes. This is where student independently accomplishes the tasks in all instructional areas with current accommodations and modifications. So no assistive technology is needed. Student accomplishes tasks in all instructional areas with currently used assistive technology. It's needed. You're going to document it, and then you're going to move on. And then student does not accomplish tasks in all instructional areas. Additional solutions including assistive technology, may be needed. And that's where you say, okay, we're going to initiate an assessment. So this is just to help you with the consideration. And you can see how they actually have move to column B1, move to column C, move to B2. So it just walks your team right through it. So this is just a consideration form, just a guide to help you along that.
And keep in mind,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, keep in mind that the IEP itself is overwhelming to parents. And then when we add extra forms with processes that are new, that's also overwhelming. And so some districts have adapted this to be part of their process, but think about that as you create AT process in your schools, user-friendly forms
I just wanted to show you, we had talked about the SETT and we made just a very simple version of it that you can try. So I just wanted to show you just very simple, and you'll be able to just modify it yourself. But just because we had talked about that, I thought it would be helpful for you to see that. So, okay, when you're looking at your assessment, this is where it's, you know, a simple roadmap: gathering information, you're identifying the tasks and the tools, you're trialing the tools, it's a team decision, and then you document and plan for your implementation. So we just wanted to give you a visual for what an assessment means. We are hoping that that helps you a little as you're thinking what an assessment is. Okay, and then we've also given you some assessment resources. And there, again, these two here are some of the most effective forms that I used when I was doing assessments. So there's a planner that just shows you, it actually just walks through who's going to do what when you're doing the assessment. And so you're, you know, who's going to do it, you're going to create, you don't have to create a written assessment plan. This just kind of walks you through what you want to do with it. If you do want to, and you're gathering your information, you're analyzing your tools. So it really just gives you a process to walk through all of that. And so we wanted to show you that. And then the other one I liked is the evaluation of the effectiveness. This is a really nice one to take data when you're doing your trials. What is the student doing? What do they want? What do you want to see them be able to do? And what the tool how the tool will help them do that. So in each of these, we also just have a one-page sheet that talks about consideration assessment. If that's helpful for you to share with somebody, we just wanted to be able to give you that overview. So that's something that's there for you in each section. Oh, okay. Wondering if student is making progress on their current goals, but the team thinks that with AT, the student might be able to make progress on more ambitious goals. Would AT consideration be appropriate? For example, a student makes progress on goals focused on communicating basic wants, needs without AT, but team believes that exploring AT could help identify ways that the student could make progress on a goal on building reciprocal communication with peers and or adults regarding their ideas, thoughts, etc. Very much a good reason to consider AT, and then perhaps make a goal that would address that. So because it sounds like they're making progress, but you think they could have another goal too. So do you have anything to add to that, Kristen?
No, I agree. That sounds like a great reason.
So, okay. And my colleague is using materials that are from Quiet. Yes, Quiet is a great organization. Those are the leaders in the field. And so, yeah, they have created those forms. So that's great. And Lori, that's what this is about. We are happy to help you with developing one, but we're hoping we have given you some good tools to start with here. So that's great. Okay, so implementation, that was actually something that people did respond that they wanted some ideas for implementation. And hopefully even what we've given you already is leading you toward that direction. But as you look at an implementation plan, that's going to outline the steps that your team will take for the tools that you've decided through the assessment are needed to be effectively integrated to achieve the desired outcome. So you need to ask some key questions here too, like what does success look like? Is it reduced time for doing some work? Is it increased accuracy? Is it the quantity that they'll be able to produce? Is it the quality, or is it engagement? Those are just some of the different success measures. What does the student need to know and learn and be able to do? And who's going to spend the time to help that student learn it? Who's going to provide instruction on the tool, on the strategy? When will the instruction take place? Is it going to be during the class? Is it, when is that instruction going to take place? And how will the use of the tool be integrated across the student's day so that it's used throughout the day and not just in one class? So those are some of the implementation questions. We thought here it might be helpful to give an example of an implementation. So for voice typing, many of us know how voice typing works because many of us do it already, right? When we're in the car, we do voice typing for our text messages. So, Kristen, do you want to take over?
Sure.
Here?
Yeah. Okay, so back to that question of what does a student need to know, learn, and be able to do? We know that they need to know the mechanics of how to use it, right? They need to know where it is in their toolbar. So if they're using it in Google, how do I turn it on? How do I, how am I using it mechanically? And often we get that tool, we show them how to use it, and we think, great, this is a go. We have our accommodation of speech to text. But there's a whole process to learning to write with your voice that takes some instruction and some instruction in context. Speech recognition as AT, there's a guide by Daniel Cochran and Kelly Keys, and it takes them through planning what they're writing. They need to think about what they're going to say and how they want to say it. They need to compose with their voice. So say it, identify revisions and check it. So by listening, maybe using text to speech to listen to it. And how do they do that? Or reading it themselves. And then revise and edit the fix it. So we put a link to that process because that's an amazing process there. And lots of support documents with that. But we also need to remember that these students are often just learning the conventions of writing, right? They're learning the skills at their grade level to do what the target or the standard is for that grade level. So they've got these, a layered task that's happening because we need to be thinking about teaching and modeling in context. So we have those, learn the mechanics, having the process of doing it. And then we need to be thinking about doing this in the context of the classroom. So if we think about across environments, maybe in the ELA class, it's paragraph writing, thinking of topic, sentence, transition words, all those things happening with paragraph writing. But maybe in science, it's answering questions in a Google Doc. And then in math, you might be observing and see that the kids go up to the whiteboard to do a problem and they're taking turns. What does that mean for that student that's using speech to text? So what challenges come up when using the tools in context across the environments? And this is where teachers are amazing when we're collaborating. So as an OT and AT specialist, really collaborating with that teacher who can see and understand how it's going to be used in context and modeled in context. And I think sometimes we end up training the student in an isolated way and then not looking at that context.
Again, we wanted to give you some resources for implementation specifically. So once again, Quiet has an implementation AT planner that is also very good. This is not like, a form that everything has to be filled out. It's just things to think about, and then you can fill out the ones that are, make sense. And you don't have to fill out the plan. It's really to think about who will collaborate in the development of the implementation plan and what specific goals and tasks will be addressed. So it's really those key questions. But then things like, how will AT be integrated into the curriculum and daily activities? So that's where the team comes together and talks about, okay, we know they need to use this in these 3 classes. So who's going to be able to help them do that in each of those classes? Who's going to train the teacher so the teacher knows, so that if something breaks down, the teacher can help the student, and they haven't just come with a device or a tool that, the people that are actually supposed to be there helping them don't know about. So who's going to train even the staff that's going to be helping the students? So, and then what tools and strategies will be used. It just walks you through those types of questions. And then one of them is, how will the equipment and materials be managed and maintained? Is the device coming charged? Is it going to be updated? Just even those kind of questions need to be addressed. One of the things we wanted to give you was some specific forms. So that one is the plan, and those give you some questions to think about. We've also just given you some examples of a school day switch planning by activity. So how can you use the switches? How can you teach the student to use the switches from activity throughout the day? Another thing we've given you is just some examples of districts that are just different forms. One is, who agrees how the equipment's going to be taken care of? What is the form for checking it in and checking it out? We just thought it might be helpful to give you some of those real specific examples of forms that will help you with the implementation. So, and then again, the About AT implementation plan is just an overview of what an implementation plan looks like.
I just remembered something from being in a district and having a great idea that I was going to fill out the implementation plan as the OT because, you know, it was related to writing the assistive technology, but the team is who completes that implementation plan and plans
Right.
for that, not just one person, because if it is you as the OT, you will be the one working on implementing.
Yeah.
If together with the teacher, the SLP, the parent, you're thinking about implementation, then everybody has a part in that and a say in that. And when more people have input to that plan, then they're more invested in that plan. And you also get a very realistic plan because you're all
Right.
thinking together about how could this be implemented in a practical way.
Right. Yeah, and especially since some of the questions are who. So actually people are taking responsibility for it. It will be me. So you want them part of the process. It doesn't go well if you assign it to someone and tell them. So,
Right. No.
when you're thinking about all of this, the consideration, the assessment, and then the implementation, we got to remember that this is about the student. This is for the student and about the student. So why does it matter to the student? We need to think about that. And the student needs to be part of the process too. And then what would cause them to be motivated to use the tool? And have we actually built a relationship with the student to know what motivates and engages them? That's all part of the process. And we need to recognize that in some cases, we are actually asking them to do something that is initially hard and that they don't see their peers doing. And so we are actually going to be helping them build confidence in using these tools and build confidence in themselves. So did you want to add anything to this, Kristen?
I was just going to say this is true across all the processes. Even when you're first trying things with a student, you're really getting that input. You know, you could use things like a Likert scale that's picture-based or word-based, depending on the student, that they give input to how they liked trying that tool or not. So getting their input all along the way. So this is not something that's a surprise. They know it's coming and they've had input to it.
So we thought, let's look at text to speech. Again, many of us have seen text to speech. Most of us have listened to an audiobook. You do actually have text to speech where it will highlight the text and then read it back to you. When you're thinking about text to speech, the ability of a device to take text and read it out loud, what does a student need to know or learn to be able to do that? Good. Where the text starts and ends, how to select the text they want to read aloud, right? How to turn on the feature. Yep. How to turn up and down the volume. Great. Just the speed. So those are the mechanics and the things they need to know, right? So who is spending time with the student to provide that instruction? So if you just think about a student, you have one of your students and you were thinking, we're going to be teaching text to speech. Who do you think might be able to spend the time with the student to provide that instruction in learning that?
This tool is one that's really universal, isn't it? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so how cool if the gen ed teacher is modeling it, if it's a
Right.
universal support in your district too.
Right. Well, and the technology teacher, would the technology teacher be teaching all the students? That I'm envisioning they would. So is that what you were thinking? Is the technology teacher would be teaching all the students? Yeah. And then a teacher on special assignment, that is
Right.
sometimes who does it, right? That they have that knowledge. And so they're teaching, and hopefully, again, like Kristen said, they might be teaching all the students. So, yeah. So, okay. And then how will, ed tech sometimes helps with this for all students, right? Yeah. Yep. If the tool is available to all students, then a whole group lesson to start the work and videos of the lesson to follow up. Good. These are all great ideas. And so in this case, it would be universally available, possibly, But you also know there's some teachers that would be specific people that would be teaching it. So that could be documented as the training on the IEP. So for that student who actually needs this as AT, then you would be documenting this on the IEP where that training would be happening. Okay, and then how will success and progress be measured? What do you think would be how you would measure that for text to speech? Good. Student comprehension questions. Yeah. Participation, speed and accuracy, completion of written assignments. If the student begins to generalize the skill of using the tool to access information broadly, that's great. Yeah. We also wanted to show an example of a communication device.
If you're the person that's new to AAC and wondering, how do I implement this? It does get more complicated with AAC. There is a bigger learning curve for some technology than others. So say a team has decided definitely need AAC, augmented alternative communication, and we're going to use Prolo-Quo because we've tested out 3 with the student and we found that that's the best one for them for a variety of reasons. And so you're going to have communication and literacy goals, maybe social goals that relate. But again, when we think about what does the student need to know, learn, and be able to do, there's definitely mechanics, right? There's navigating that device. There may even be alternative access like eye gaze or switch use. They're learning where the vocabulary is in the system. So mechanics there. But there's also literacy skills, social things going on, academic progress. That's all part of utilizing this communication system across all environments. And that's why implementation can feel like a big thing and why sometimes AAC is one of the most common things to be abandoned or not. You come around the next year at the IEP and go, oh, we haven't made the progress we thought we were going to make. And part of that is needing to have a strong implementation plan and thinking about who's spending time with the student on the instruction and use of the device. That's everyone, because they have the device throughout the whole day, right? And we want to have it available and implementing. I do want to tell you there's some great support out there for helping speech language pathologists and special education teachers, general education teachers work through how are we going to implement communication, augmentative and alternative communication throughout the school day. And so I wanted to put those couple links, a Tech Assist with us, the Special Ed Technology Center. We have 2 SLPs. And technically speaking, AAC does technical assistance. Brenda Del Monte's worked with us for years. And so these are resources for you for tackling that, looking at your particular student with your team. Couple minutes to go over this, then we want to see if there's any other questions. Some of you are here because you're in a role or you have a desire to have some district-wide plans around AT processes for things to be more consistent for students across buildings and across the district. And so that's also something Linda and I support districts with, is coming up with a plan for AT processes. And it can be as simple as making sure you have universal supports, targeted supports, and intensive supports in place around AT processes. And so I worked with a district last year and we talked about, perhaps having a tip sheet on AT consideration. Other districts might say, I'm going to implement that AT consideration guide or have a monthly newsletter on AT with a tip each month. A targeted support, universal supports are what you can grab and go and people can learn from on their own. Then targeted supports might be taking 15 minutes at that staff meeting to describe assistive technology or AT consideration, or having a more targeted training with staff on AT, or even inviting us to do a training for you either virtually or in person. And then intensive supports gets to working very specifically with the teams on a student and how to consider, assess, and then make an implementation plan for assistive technology. And that might be done in your district through an AT team, or many districts don't have an AT team. It's an AT person or no AT person. So we're also happy to do tech assist and consultations where we meet up with teams over time and work on plans for students.
And that's what we have for you today. So I hope this helps you we hope that this has helped you to clarify the AT process.